Text of Study by V.T. Houteff. Sabbath, September 28, 1946. Mount Carmel Chapel, Waco, Texas. I shall read from Mount of Blessings, beginning with the first paragraph on page 157. Quote, "To hallow the name of the Lord requires that the words in which we speak of the Supreme Being be uttered with reverence. Holy and reverend is his name. We are never in any manner to treat lightly the titles or appellations of the deity. In prayer we enter the audience chamber of the Most High, and we should come before him with holy awe. The angels veil their faces in his presence. The cherubim and the bright and holy seraphim approach his throne with solemn reverence. How much more should we, finite, sinful beings, come in a reverent manner before the Lord our Maker? But to hallow the name of the Lord means much more than this. We may, like the Jews in Christ's day, manifest the greatest outward reverence for God, and yet profane his name continually. The name of the Lord is merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and abundant in goodness and truth, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. Of the church of Christ it is written, This is the name wherewith she shall be called, the Lord our righteousness. This name is put upon every follower of Christ. It is the heritage of the child of God. The family are called after the father. The prophet Jeremiah, in the time of Israel's sore distress and tribulation, prayed, We are called by thy name, leave us not. This name is hallowed by the angels of heaven, by the inhabitants of unfallen worlds. When you pray, Hallowed be thy name, you ask that it be hallowed in this world, hallowed in you. God has acknowledged you before men and angels as his child. Pray that you may do no dishonor to the worthy name by the which ye are called. God sends you into the world as his representative. In every act of life, you are to make manifest the name of God. This petition calls upon you to possess his character. You cannot hallow his name. You cannot represent him to the world unless in life and character you represent the very life and character of God. This you can do only through the acceptance of the grace and righteousness of Christ." End quote. Will you, Brother Cyphers, lead us in prayer? And Brother Vancy Smith, will you please follow? And I shall close. Shall we kneel? Subject, questions, and answers. I am requested to answer 3 questions. Here is the first. What is wrong with the shepherd's rod? Question. Quote, How can the great stone of Daniel 2 that smote the image on the feet be a symbol of the coming of Christ, as volume 2 of the shepherd's rod, pages 161 and 162 say, when the Bible says in Daniel 2 verses 35 to 44, and you also say somewhere else that it represents the kingdoms destroying the other nations and growing greater? Please explain. End quote. Answer. The shepherd's rod plainly states that not all the words of its contents were dictated by an angel, but that which the angels did dictate is in quotation marks. It further explains that though the biblical ideas it contains are interpreted by inspiration, they are explained by finite words, and those words may not make the ideas stand out as clearly as they should. The conclusion that the stone is symbolical of Christ's second coming, however, did not originate with the shepherd's rod. Not having special light in the day it was published, and supposing that the denomination was teaching the truth on the subject, the rod had no choice but to thus identify the stone. And inasmuch as the rod did not originate the idea that the stone represents the second coming of Christ, one cannot hold the rod responsible for it. After the light on the subject came to us, we abandoned the popular theory and zealously proclaimed the truth. Our position that the stone represents the kingdom is clear and in harmony with the Bible. I shall now read the second question. What is wrong with patriarchs and prophets? Question. Why does Sister White in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 539, say that the sheaf of the first fruits of the harvest was presented on the second day of the feast, whereas Leviticus 23, verse 11, says it was presented on the day after the Sabbath, Sunday? Please explain. Well, there is but one explanation, and that is, if the Bible teaches that the sheaf was to be presented before the Lord on the day after the Sabbath, and if Patriarchs and Prophets teaches that it was to be presented on the second day of the Passover feast, we cannot say that they were both right. But if any is, the Bible must be right. The answer to this question, therefore, is the same as to our previous one. Patriarchs and Prophets did not originate the statement, the second day of the feast. No more than did the shepherd's rod originate the theory that the stone of Daniel 2 symbolizes the second coming of Christ. Patriarchs and Prophets only reiterated that which was then commonly understood. Laodicean or Davidian? Question. The third question is, how do I know that I am not still a Laodicean, that I am now a true Davidian? Answer. In order intelligently to discuss this question, we must first have a mental picture of what Laodiceans are like, and what Davidians must be like. I shall read Revelation chapter 3, verse 13 down to 18. And unto the angel of the Laodiceans write, These things saith the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would that thou wert cold or hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm, and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. What is wrong with the angel? He is lukewarm. He is neither cold nor hot. If he were cold, he would be uncomfortable. He would build a fire to keep himself warm. If he were hot, he would be uncomfortable. He would open the windows to keep cool if possible. But he is neither cold nor hot. He is lukewarm, satisfied with what he is and where he is. He thinks he is all right. But the all-knowing one thinks he is all wrong. And the only thing that the Lord can do is to spew him out of his mouth. For when a person is satisfied with his position and attainments, it is next to impossible to do anything that will help him out of his delusion. The rich young ruler who asked, What shall I do to inherit eternal life? Was too well satisfied with his riches, and as a result he flatly turned down the advice that Jesus gave him. Sell all that thou hast, and distribute to the poor, and come, follow me. Just that moment he was spewed out of the Master's mouth. Inspiration said nothing more about him. What made the angel of Laodicea satisfied, comfortable, lukewarm? Please read Revelation 3, verses 17 and 18. Quote, Because thou sayest, I am rich, and increased with goods, and have need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked? I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire, that thou mayst be clothed, and that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear, and anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou mayest see." End quote. The angel's belief that he is rich and increased with goods and in need of nothing is what made him lukewarm. In other words, his statement that he is rich, increased with goods, and in need of nothing is untrue, for in reality he is wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked, in need of everything, but he himself does not know it. By his words, "I am rich and increased with goods," he is actually saying that he has the Bible truths and the testimonies for the church, and that in addition to these, he has other denominational books, an increase. Thus, he makes himself believe that he has the whole truth to carry him clear into the kingdom, that he needs nothing more. The Lord's counsel, however, that he buy of him gold that is tried in the fire, so that he may be rich, unveils the fact that Laodicean's riches are not pure gold, that the so-called increase is not an increase of truth, but of uninspired, private interpretations of the Scriptures, interpretations that did not come from the Lord, are not tried in the fire. He is naked, too, notwithstanding the fact that a white garment is being offered to him. That is, he has not availed himself of the righteousness of Christ. And his being naked, not having on any clothes, denotes that he has no righteousness in anyone's either, but only his own. Moreover, he is physically incapacitated, blind. And for his ailment, the Lord's eye salve is the only remedy. If he would but take the Lord's counsel and apply the salve to his ailing eyes, he could then see. What could the salve actually be? First, let us see what makes a man spiritually blind. The one who knows even the number of the hairs of our heads points out that if the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? Matthew 6, verse 23. If negligence of spiritual light makes the offender blind, then something that will arouse in him zeal for spiritual light, light that will unveil to him his true condition, is his only remedy, the only salve that can possibly open his eyes. Let me illustrate. Individuals often write in saying, "I have heard so much against the shepherd's rod, and what I heard made me unmercifully prejudiced. But I happened to get hold of one of your little tracts, and for courtesy's sake, I thought I'd see what it is about. But as I read a few pages of it, my eyes were then opened, and I read the whole tract. I am now anxious to read the rest of your books. Will you please send me whatever reading matter you can?" Here is another such providential incident. A certain person wrote from China, quote, "I picked up half of your Christmas calendar, tract 13, on the street, and my wife a few days later picked up the other half beside the curb of the same drive. I pieced them together and got your address. I am deeply interested in all it contained, and I'm anxiously awaiting to hear from you. Could you tell me everything that will help me find my joy? With many thanks and best wishes, praying the Master's rich blessings on you and your household, and on your labors for him." End quote. These brethren obviously represent those who can be pried out of their Laodiceanism. Their experiences well illustrate that the salve represents inspiration's timely truth. But how can one possibly get others to listen or to read unless they are willing to unbiasedly investigate that which comes to him in the name of the Lord? Now let me tell you of another class of individuals of whom I often hear. Listen to what they say. Quote, "Please keep your rod to yourself. Take my name from your mailing list. I am not in the least interested in what you are doing. Your booklets go into the fire just as soon as they come. I never read them, and I never will. No, not a line. I am satisfied with my religion. I belong to the true remnant church, and I expect to go with it. How dare you try to deceive me?" End quote. This kind of talk is typically Laodicean. It perfectly expresses their lukewarmness. The Lord, though, is against their attitude. Think of it, a Laodicean saying to one of his own brethren who writes to him in the name of the Lord, "I never read your booklets. I never will read them. Keep them to yourself. I have all the truth to carry me clear to the kingdom. Go deceive someone else, not me." Is there something other than an attitude like this which could completely and more quickly sever one's communication with God? And if the language which I have not just read to you does not say, "I have need of nothing," then what would say it? This group of Laodiceans, you see, will never have their eyes opened, will never be anything but wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. They can never be reached, no, not by the Lord himself. He himself cannot possibly get a hearing from them. The only thing God can do is spew them out of his mouth, never again to mention their name at the throne of grace. This they bring to themselves, all because they have accumulated theories, ideas, formalities, and prejudices, a pile of so-called truth, their great increase of so-called goods. They read the Bible with the hope of finding proof by which to disagree with everyone but themselves. Yes, they even spend hours and days in searching of hooks upon which to hang their doubts concerning another's work. I may be on the way to the bank with $1 million, and I may seriously think that I am a millionaire. But suppose the banker tells me, "Your money is counterfeit." Then how rich would I be? I would be as rich as is the angel of Laodicea. Just such an eye-opening experience is what the Laodiceans need to have. Unless something like it happens to them, they will forever think that they are rich. Some day, though, not long hence, the heavenly watcher himself will tell them face to face that their gold is not tried in the fire. Then their eyes will be opened, but not soon enough to do them any good. They are now looking into the distance and feeling sure that what they are seeing and what they are heading for is the sea of glass. But when they get to the end of the way, they will be disappointed when they learn that they have been looking only at a mirage. Then they will be anxious to know the truth, but to their sorrow they will find the door closed, and will hear, "I never knew you, depart from me." By a person's face we are able to recognize his race, and we can judge one's profession by the kind of clothes one wears. If a person wears fine clothes and is not decked with everything he can put on, we judge him to be a businessman. If he wears lower-grade clothes and has on his body every trinket he can put on, then we judge him to be a cheap sport. If he is clothed in overalls, we judge him to be a common laborer. If he is dressed otherwise, we judge him to be a white-collar worker. But if he has on no clothes, then no one but God can tell what he is. Now, if the white garment represents Christ's righteousness, then his having on no garment, whose righteousness would he have, if not his own righteousness, self-righteousness, the righteousness with which he was born? The Laodiceans' condition is just that. They are as poor, as blind, as wretched, as miserable, and as naked as when they were born. In all respect, I realize that this is saying much, but it is not saying too much because it is the Lord Jehovah who says it. He invites the brethren to buy of him gold, the kind that is tried in the fire, so that they might be rich. He invites them to put on the white raiment, so that they be not cast out into outer darkness, there to weep and to gnash their teeth. If they do not accept his invitation now, yes, now, their nakedness will doubtless be exposed. They and all those about them will see that a mirage is a mirage. If they would heed his advice now, they would no longer be naked, no longer be nondescript, no longer be without a white garment. You who are within the reach of my voice ought to know whether you are still Laodiceans or not. If you do the opposite of what Laodiceans do, then of course you cannot still be a Laodicean. It is just as easy to know whether you are a Davidian or not, as it is to know whether you are a Laodicean or not. To find out if you are a Davidian, you must first know what a Davidian is. Well, briefly said, a Davidian is recognized by his white garment. From whom does he get it? And what does he give in exchange for it? The answer is given through the prophet Zechariah. Zechariah chapter 3, verses 1 to 4. Quote, "And he showed me Joshua the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him. And the Lord said unto Satan, The Lord rebuke thee, O Satan, even the Lord that hath chosen Jerusalem rebuke thee. Is not this a brand plucked out of the fire? Now Joshua was clothed with filthy garments, and stood before the angel. And he answered and spake unto those that stood before him, saying, Take away the filthy garments from him. And unto him he said, Behold, I have caused thine iniquity to pass from thee, and will clothe thee with a change of raiment." End quote. The first one to be given the garment is Joshua, the high priest, the highest official in the church. Then if he has not the garment, no one else has it either. From this we see that the genuine revival and reformation starts at the head, not at the feet. But what takes place before Joshua is given the right to put the garment on? His iniquities are taken away. He has repented of his sins, and the Lord has blotted them out. Satan, though, is right there to resist and accuse him. But thanks be to God that the Lord is also there to rebuke the enemy. Do you catch the lesson, brother, sister? Of course, you will have to meet opposition, but what of it? Is it too much to stand firm for truth and righteousness when the majority forsake? Read Matthew 5, verses 10 to 12. The apostles and the prophets did not only stand opposition from their own brethren, but they even gladly died for their white garment. You, though, are not now asked to give up your life, but to save it, whereas the wicked must give up their lives. Yes, the tables are now reversed. The Lord will not permit you to be consumed by the flame. He is to rescue you as a brand plucked out of the fire. From this we see that Joshua of today is having his filthy garments exchanged for a white robe, for the righteousness of Christ. Let us now read verse 5. Quote, "And I said, Let them set a fair mitre upon his head. So they set a fair mitre upon his head, and clothed him with garments. And the angel of the Lord stood by. End quote. Not only is he clothed in white raiment, but he is also crowned with a fair mitre. And what could such a crown denote other than the authority vested in him as heaven's appointed judge? As such as he was clothed from his head to his feet, and the angel of the Lord stood by. What a gift, and what a bodyguard for one to have in the world like ours! In spite of it, though, human beings are very slow to take their stand on the Lord's side. The Joshua of today has these good things, and they will be his forever, if he walks in the ways of the Lord, and if he keeps the Lord's charge. Besides being the judge in the Lord's house and keeping his courts, he is also given the right to walk in places where the angels walk. Now, verse 8. Hear now, O Joshua the high priest, thou and thy fellows that sit before thee, for they are men wondered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch. Not only Joshua, but also those who sit before him are admonished to hear this charge. And what kind of men are they? Men wondered at. This symbolism shows that the angel of the church of the Laodiceans is no longer in charge of the Lord's house, and that the congregation in it is wholly made up of men to be wondered at. Obviously then, as a result of the revival and reformation within the Laodicean church, another church emerges. But Joshua, not the angel of Laodicea, is in charge of this church. Who brought this revival and reformation? This great change? The branch. And according to Isaiah 11, 1-5, he is the Lord, the Son of David. We shall now read verse 9. For behold, the stone that I have laid before Joshua, upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave the graving thereof, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of the land in 1 day. This is why those who sit before Joshua are men wondered at. The stone, church, or kingdom, that is in Joshua's sight is not made up of blind men. They as a group have 7 eyes, perfect vision. Now mark what is to happen when the church is made up of such men. The sin in the land is quickly removed in 1 day. Let us not fool ourselves. Here are set forth 3 genuine conditions: revival, reformation, and a purification of the church. The Lord is to have a pure church and a clean people. We shall now read verse 10. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall ye call every man his neighbor under the vine and under the fig tree. And then what? The gospel work is to be quickly finished by having every man of the Lord's house call his neighbor to his own patch of land, to that which God has preordained that everyone should have. The statement, call every man his neighbor under the vine and under the fig tree, appears also in Micah 4. It teaches the same thing that Zechariah teaches. Read it again at your leisure. This subject, though, does not stop with Zechariah 3. It continues on. We shall therefore turn to Zechariah chapter 6, verse 11. Then take silver and gold, and make crowns, and set them upon the head of Joshua, the son of Josedech, the high priest. The angel is commanded to take silver and gold, and to make crowns, more than one. These are set upon Joshua's head. Then what? Let us read from verse 14. And the crowns shall be to Helem, and to Jobiah, and to Jedaiah, and to Hen the son of Zephaniah, for a memorial in the temple of the Lord. The crowns of verse 11 are given first to Joshua, and verse 14 reveals that he is to pass them on to his helpers whom the Lord himself names. This is to be a memorial, an everlasting reminder in the temple of the Lord. What could all this mean? Just this. Joshua is heaven's appointed judge. He himself is crowned as such. And in compliance with the Lord's own command, Joshua crowns his helpers whom the Lord himself names. Joshua authorizes them to engage in the work, and he recognizes them as members of the house of David. In other words, Joshua is responsible to the Lord, but his helpers are responsible to Joshua. Thus it is that whatever is bound on earth is also bound in heaven. Matthew 16:19. As concretely as heaven can make it, this symbolism demonstrates that God's people are not to labor at cross purposes in their final work. All must speak the same things. All must see eye to eye. Isaiah 52:8. There is no other way that this condition can be brought about in this day and age than by the system prophesied by Zechariah. At that time God's people shall be called the holy people, the redeemed of the Lord, sought out, a city not forsaken. Isaiah 62:12. Zechariah 6 verse 12. And speak unto him, saying, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, Behold the man whose name is the branch, and he shall grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. Joshua is well instructed that the burden and the ingenuity for building this spiritual temple belongs to him whose name is the branch. He is to grow out of his place. He alone is to be exalted. He is to build the temple of the Lord. Verses 13 and 15. Even he shall build the temple of the Lord, and he shall bear the glory, and shall sit and rule upon his throne, and he shall be a priest upon his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both. And they that are far off shall come and build in the temple of the Lord, and ye shall know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto you. And this shall come to pass, if ye will diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God. Thus shall the prophecies of the 2nd chapter of Isaiah, and verses 2 to 6 of chapter 4, and also the 4th chapter of Micah be fulfilled. Finally, how do we know for certain that this message was planned and recorded especially for us, for the church today? We know it from the fact that we are the only people who have ever been favored with the work of proclaiming that the time is here for the fulfillment of these prophecies. 1, that the Lord is taking the reins in his own hands. 2, that the time of the purification of the church is at hand. 3, that the purified ones are to be under a theocracy. 4, that finally our brethren are to be brought from all nations to the house of the Lord. Isaiah 66, verses 19 and 20, an innumerable multitude. Revelation 7, verse 9. 5, that Christ's kingdom shall be set up, Daniel 2, 44 and 45, and that the work will be finished exactly as the scriptures teach. Obviously, the stone of Zechariah 3, verse 9, is the same stone spoken of in Daniel 2, verse 45. Now you can answer for yourselves the question as to whether you are a true Davidian or whether you are still a Laodicean. If you are satisfied with yourself, if your spiritual attainments with your own man-made gospel program, if you think that the Lord is speaking to you by whatever happens to click in your mind, if you think that you have all the truth and that you have need of nothing more, if you think that everyone who does not have your stamp of approval on his beliefs is a false prophet, and if you are smiting your knees through fear that someone is trying to deceive you because he teaches something new, though you never even give it a thought, that you may be slamming the door against a truth-bearer who may have the Lord's eye salve in his satchel, then you must be as good a Laodicean as you can possibly be. But if you realize that your garments are filthy, that your iniquity has not been blotted out, that you are to walk in God's ways as he directs through the Joshua of today, that you are all for God and not at all for self or for the world, then of course you either are or are beginning to be a true Davidian. If you have not attained to all this, you should see that you do. And if you already have, then keep advancing in the light. And it is certain that you shall finally stand on Mount Zion with the Lamb. This afternoon, we have again studied God's program for the setting up of the kingdom, and you can see clearly that we are not looking at a mirage, brother, sister, but we are most certainly looking at the sea of glass. Now take the counsel of the Lord, and no longer be like a piece of bark drifting in the sea.